Hello, Dr. Tania Israel. Thank you so, so much for coming back and chatting with us for, I think it's our ninth time. We are so eternally grateful to you.
Oh my gosh, I could not be happier to be here. I have been wanting to talk to you two so much since the election. So thank you for inviting me back.
I mean, please don't thank us. We all but begged you.
Yes,
Like
like
we
for
it,
real.
like Tanya, I mean, not, Katie's very polite with these emails, but the undertone reading between the lines was, please God, please come talk to us.
Please. And it's not just us. I have
Yeah.
people, I know I mentioned this before we hit record, but people that are very close to me in my life that are like, I really wish I knew what Dr. Tanya had to say. And I'm like, okay, okay, I get it. We're getting her on. Don't worry. She's coming back. So I think seeing your name on their podcast queue today will be a balm for their soul, just like it is for us. So thank you. No pressure also. But yes, thank you
We're
for
gonna
being here,
fix it
Tanya.
all. All gonna be
Yes.
good.
Okay, so to start off, Tanya, how are you doing, or what would you like to express? So today is, so everyone knows, it's November 25th. It's a couple days before Thanksgiving. That's when we're recording. So we're less than 3 weeks out from the election, but how are you? I would imagine you're getting a lot of requests or conversation. I would just love to know anything you're willing to share.
All right, I'm gonna go back a little bit
Great.
to what was October 2024, which was it was such a busy month for me. I was like doing like programs on a bunch of different college campuses. I was going to my 40th high school reunion. I was doing all these things. And in the middle of all of this, because I was giving some talks at Lafayette College, which it turns out is in Pennsylvania. And so I'm in Pennsylvania and I'm done with my talks. And I'm like, wait a minute, I shouldn't leave this state. I should stay here and talk to voters. I should get out the vote for Kamala. So this was like the middle of October. And I had a friend who was traveling around going to swing states. And I was like, Harley, where are you? And he said, I'm arriving in Hazleton, Pennsylvania Friday morning. And I was like, I don't know where that is, but I'm going to find it and meet you there.
Oh my gosh,
And
how exciting.
I know it was just amazing. So I did. So I was like, great. I met him there. There's like a small campaign office. We went, we talked to voters. It was incredible. Actually, I did a whole little thing about this on my podcast on Ready to Be Strong. So if people want to listen to swing state stories, and there's a blog post that accompanies it because there's all the pictures. So anyway, there's a full like multimedia experience where you can learn more about what that was like. But before I left that weekend, I had already committed to coming back for the week before the election because I was like, this is a gold mine here. This is like low propensity voters. Nobody's talking to these people. And so this is going to make all the difference, right? And I'm going to recruit people to come, canvass with me. Anyway, this is what I was doing in the lead up to the election. So I was there through election day. And it was an amazing experience because, one, for me, campaigns are always an amazing experience. They're like energizing, and I feel engaged and useful, and I bond with people. And I was making Kamala friendship bracelets and handing them out to everybody. So I was just really fully in it. And so that's the lead up. Um, and then the election happened. And I was like, oh, I have to admit that because this is the other thing that was great about canvassing in Hazleton is I had no idea what the outcome of the election was going to be. People kept texting me from California, like, are we going to win? Are we going to win? And I'm like, I don't know. I was talking to people across such a range of viewpoints. And so I didn't know, but I know I was kind of hoping, and then we didn't get it. And then I have been sort of sitting in this for the last several weeks of one, yes, like Wednesday morning, the morning after the election, I'm getting emails like, "Will you come on this podcast? Will you do this like talk here? Will you?" And I was like, "Okay, my work here is not done. We have not somehow solved political division." And so I have been kind of working with that and trying to unpack stuff for the last few weeks and would love to like hear how you all are doing more and see if we can like unpack it together. We'll do the unboxing of the election right here.
Oh no, can we send it back? I
What
don't want
what
it.
is the return policy?
Exactly. You don't even have to send me my money back. You just take it. Y'all. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, oh goodness. So, you had sent us 2 episodes of your podcast to listen to. And so you've been in my head all day. And, I heard you talking about canvassing and, why it's important to you to stay busy, which of course resonated so much with me. And of course, you have this beautiful built-in mission. I felt like this kind of sense of like envy, like this has got to be impossible. Like, oh my God, I'm sure people are calling you all the time, including us 2 yahoos. And also this sense of like, have you even had a chance yourself to respond to it? Or like envy that like you have this built-in mission and also wondering like, have you had a chance as a person and not just as a psychologist and as a researcher and as like an amazing human to have time?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't know, I'm sort of finding my way through it in a couple of different ways. One of the things that I did is I finally came home. I was traveling for over a month and I finally got back home. And so home is where the hot tub is. So I've been spending a lot of time sitting in the hot tub thinking about this election. Um, and one of the things that happens when I'm in the hot tub is I get ideas, like creative ideas. And so I've been trying to, as Hamilton did, I'm trying to write my way out of this. And so I just started like having these ideas of things I wanted to write, and I was writing, but boy, it's been hard. It's like I'll have an idea and I'll be able to take it part way, and then I was just having so much trouble like finishing it because I'm like, what do I conclude here? So finally, like the last couple days I was like, I have to finish these thoughts. And today I send out a monthly email. And so I sent out all of these things. And like, there's this blog post about Hazelton. There's this piece that I wrote on Psychology Today about how we relate to media. Then I have this whole train analogy in there. And then I wrote this piece called um, When an Election Gives You a Shellacking, Make Decoupage. I'm like, where do I get these ideas? So I have been working with lots of metaphors. I've been trying to make sense of it all. And that's one of the ways I've been doing it. The other thing I've been doing is having lots of conversations with people, like with friends, but also like with media people and all these things. And trying to see like, how are other people making sense of it? How can I make sense of this? What can I learn from this? What can we collectively learn from all of this? And so that's kind of where I am right now. Yeah, I don't know if I've really had a chance to process it all. I don't know that any of us have, but I guess I would just say I'm in the process now.
Thanks for explaining that, Tanya. The decoupage it's just so visual. I love it so much. It's hilarious and amazing. And I love it. It makes so much sense knowing you for so long that like you're leaning toward creativity, you're leaning toward creation, and you're such a creative maker in the world. Like it's just it's really just such a beautiful thing to see how you're processing it through that, or it seems like that. And also your hot tub. I mean, thank goodness for hot tubs.
I wish I could just gift everyone a hot tub because I think we would all be so much better off then.
I have to agree. That's the best part of my house is I have a really
Mm,
nice bathtub, and I have been finding a lot of healing just there, like that's
mm.
something that I'm trying to do multiple times a week, and I think I need to up my game to daily. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's so nice. But yeah, I'm wondering how it's been for you energetically, if you're willing to share, kind of I'm wondering the conversations. I would love to know about the conversations that you're having. Like, what are people
Mhm.
coming to you with? Because, I think it's like I know Karen and I have been having these conversations on the podcast about just our feelings, our raw feelings around the election. And I know that for me, the conversations that I'm having with people are really stilted and
Mhm.
they're really it's kind of like this I'm I think what I'm actually seeing in my own sphere is kind of this like shock that people are still in. And so like they have like this 40-yard stare type of thing. And like I went to a friendsgiving over the weekend and, I don't have a lot of friends who are, okay, I'll just be honest, I don't have any friends who are Trumpers. And so everyone there was devastated. And we're trying really hard to like, have a good time and like be cheerful. And we are. And like people are talking about things outside of the election. But there is a general sense of a heaviness, I would say.
Mhm.
And, I try to make jokes and other people do too, but it's not landing right now. And I think that there's like a grief process that I think the people in my group are going through. And I would just love to know A, what the conversations are that you're having right now, and then
Mhm.
B, how they've changed since November 5th.
Yeah. The things I'm hearing from people are numb, resigned, um, tuning out. Um, and the question, so I think that that's a lot of what's going on for the people around me, all of whom are on the left. So that's who's in my ears. Um, the question I keep asking people, and I would love to have this conversation, is like, what do you make of the election outcome? Like what happened here? What do we make of this, and what can we take away from this that's going to help us in the future? So that's a lot of the conversation I've been having. And honestly, like I'm hearing the things that I'm hearing are, well, I guess the economy was a big deal, misogyny and racism, um, misinformation. So, like, I feel like there's this narrative on the left that's very it's kind of narrow, I have to say, like because I'm hearing exactly the same thing from everybody I talk to, and I'm like, wow, there must be more here for us to learn. And so those are some of the conversations I'm trying to have, like is to complexify it. So, but tell me, like, where are you all? Like are these kind of the categories of things you're thinking and hearing? Are there other things that you're making of all of this?
I mean, I'll go. Such a good question. And like I said, I've had you in my head, my ear all day. And it is humbling to admit, but you're right that Democrats are just as narrow-minded, are just as insulting, are just
Mhm.
as, oh my gosh, what's the word that you used? Wasn't I don't know if it was self-righteous. Like
Mhm.
we're shitty, right? And we're not, it doesn't help talk about how stupid people are or how racist people are or how whatever people are. Like that's not, I feel like we learned nothing from this narrative 8 years ago. We learned nothing about how not to be insulting. And I feel like this election is a reflection of the fact that people are like, you're not going to call me stupid. I'm going to show you. Right. And I think that's part of it. And I do think that there are obviously huge swaths of this country that no one understands and no one is talking to.
Yeah.
And that like I hate when people talk about the liberal media and the media elite and all this shit, but not for nothing are most of the media companies in this country based in New York City, which
Mhm.
is one place in this giant country. And I think it really speaks to a lack of understanding of the electorate, a lack of good news. There are a lot of news deserts in this country, and
Mhm.
just this humbling again realization that like I just hear the things that people are saying around me, and I hear the things that are coming out of my mouth. And again, like we've said, like I don't want people saying that about me.
Mm.
So why is it okay to say that about them? Like that's where we've gotten to.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the the way that we talk about other people does not make them want us to be in charge of them. You know, it's like if we are so dismissive and so disrespectful, and we clearly don't really know anything about their lives and their values, like why on earth would they want us making decisions for them? Hmm.
Oof. I so appreciate what the two of you are saying, and I'm learning in real time here because I think it's really hard. I don't know. I keep thinking of the metaphor like eating our lunch. Like I'm just like I just feel like very humbled. Um because I think self-righteous is the term that's really resonating with me. And it's me, it's the people around me, it's the things I have said and done, it's the things that the people around me have said and done. It's everything that what the two of you are talking about. And I think there is a at least in my experience and my personal feeling, a lack of understanding that I have about the rest of the country. And like Karen, what you just said about media companies being in New York City is so real. And it's like if you think about all of the or LA, but mostly New York, it's like all of the late night shows. So many people get their news from late night if they're on the left. And like if so, people get their news from Saturday Night Live, like that's real. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I stopped watching Saturday Night Live last week because I was just like, I can't do this right now. And it's like, I don't think this is, I don't know that I think there's like a way of consumption for me that I need to dramatically alter. And I think it's like, I think there's a lot of reckoning that I need to have inside of my own self on my own blind spots of like why like what you just said, Tanya, is so real in terms of like if we're I don't remember exactly how you said it, but like if we're constantly saying that people are stupid, this is not how you said it, but like this is like if we're constantly saying people are stupid, why would they hire us to lead them? And it's like, whoa, like it's tough. Like, how do we move forward and we listen to each other? We do what you have taught us to do. I don't know. It's kind of this like quiet that I feel that I think I need to just look inside of myself, frankly.
Yeah, it's so much to try to take in and shift for us. But definitely the self-righteousness, I think the hypocrisy, I mean, there's hypocrisy on all sides. And we are so quick to point out the hypocrisy on the other side. And we just don't want to see it on our own side. And I feel like I'm working so hard on being aware of that what I realize I can do is like rub people on my own side really the wrong way with it. So this is where I'm having like the challenging dialogue, you know? It's like, people lay out, here's like the four things that everybody's saying, as their takeaways are. And I'm like, but what about this? And what if we thought about democracy in this way? And people, so I feel like I'm saying things that are different from what people are used to hearing, and it doesn't sit well because it's one, just it's so not comforting. But the other thing it is it's really calling us to task. Like we actually have to change something. And I will admit, I don't know exactly what that will look like in terms of I know some things that we can do, on an individual perspective, and I'm a psychologist, so that's what I do. I'm like everybody, and it's actually everything I've laid out in Facing the Fracture is exactly the same stuff that I would say post-election. It's like this is a path that's going to help us on our own personal level navigating, this divided world, but it's also going to help us gain some insight that's going to help to strengthen our ability to make any progress with some of the values that I still think are really important and policies that I think will be helpful. But we've got to do it in a really different way if we want anybody to hand that power over to us.
And again, it's we all want things to change, but we don't want to change. Like things really need to shift around here. Like I'm gonna keep doing the exact same thing I've always done, but we somehow want magic things magically to shift. And you know, I think one of the other things that I have been thinking a lot about is that I think we I think people assume that this message came through loud and clear that if you vote a certain way, that you are saying that you don't care about me as a woman, as a queer person, as a person of color, as a whatever. And that people went into the voting booth voting, I'm voting not just for me, I'm voting for all y'all. And then I think people think like, oh, that's how people vote. But that's not how people vote.
Mhm.
That's not how most people vote. Most people, I don't know if it's most, but people vote like I'm tired of paying X number of dollars for eggs. I want
Mhm.
something to change around here. This just isn't working for me. Am I better off than I was 4 years ago? No. And I think that's part of what feeds this narrative that like you don't care about me, you're a bigot, you're whatever. And I feel like that's not how people operate in their lives. It's just
Yeah.
not real.
And we push people away so much when we say that they're bigots, that they're hateful. Um, uh, the the research shows that people are not as they don't hate us as much as we estimate that they do. They don't dehumanize us as much as we think they do. And I've started to think about, all of this, the narrative that we have about hate, about anti-trans hate and anti-Asian hate and, anti-Black hate, like all the hate that we're identifying. And there's a there's a reason that we frame it that way because from a political narrative perspective, but from a psychological perspective, I don't even know that it's good for us to think of ourselves as being as hated as we do. And it also causes us to lash out against those people who we see as being hateful in ways that it's like you were saying, Karen, it's such a disconnect.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out, Tanya. I think that is like that nuanced perspective around hate is very helpful to articulate. Like that is something I was texting with someone on election day, someone from my hometown in Michigan. And we don't talk that much, but I know she's left. And I remember texting her just saying like, "Are you okay? And are your kids okay? And how are you doing?" And she said that she was really struggling. And the last line of her text was, "I guess hate won," with a
Mm,
shrug emoji. And I didn't respond. I didn't know what to respond because I don't agree. And I knew I didn't agree, but I didn't have the words to articulate that. And I wish I would have talked to you and we've had this conversation in that moment. Um, I think you saying that it's not good for us to feel that way is so helpful because it doesn't, like Karen, what you had said earlier, it doesn't accomplish anything for us to say the things that a lot of people are saying over and over and over. Like, but I think what you're saying, Tanya, is to actually look at how it's making us feel to say these things. And I think it takes an enormous amount of strength and to rise above that narrative to consider another narrative. So, like when you're talking to these people in your life, Tanya, that you mentioned, these conversations get sticky, they don't want to hear it. It's like, I, it's just interesting I hope that people do. I hope that people are listening to this podcast and it's at least opening a different possibility for them. Because I think that there are people in my life who are still wanting to rant and they want to like that's where they are and that's their process right now. But I think in order to move forward, it sounds like it just sounds so much healthier what you're describing.
I started thinking today about how I am reacting to the people around me who are, who are on the rants
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, I need to do the thing that I always say to do when you're talking with people across the divide, because here's somebody who's on, it's a different kind of divide. We share values, but I think we need to be taking a really different approach. So one of the things we need to do is like let people have their feelings, like make space for that. I think we need to acknowledge, yes, misogyny and racism exist. Yes, that there are these things that I'm sure had an impact on the election. And, you know, hear somebody out, reflect back what you hear, all of that. And then one of the things that I do is I'm like, when I've been thinking about this, I think, where is there something that I can do something about, and trying to find that piece where I can have some action that I can take and some learning that I can do and to maybe try to offer that to people gently. I have not necessarily been doing that the last few weeks. It has not always been as gentle as maybe I aspire to because I'm feeling really frustrated, I'm feeling frustrated with our side because some of this just, I've been able to see it and I've been talking about it. And I'm like, oh, really, people? Are we still saying they're voting against their own interests when like the hubris in that and the disrespect in that I think turns people off of us. And there's a sort of moral superiority that we, play out. I was talking to somebody, I was like, well, something I'm really concerned about is like trying to maintain our democracy for the next 4 years. And they were like, well, democracy is a flawed system. And I was like, oh, indeed it is. And it's better than autocracy. Just going to say that's a more flawed system, I believe. So seeing the ways that people we're talking about things before the election that drove people away from voting on our side. And it was we're like, some people who were like, well, you say democracy, but democracy is flawed, so I'm going to sit this one out or I'm going to vote for a third party candidate or something like that. And then but somehow we're also driving away the people who are more moderate. And so there's a lot that we're doing that's not inviting people in and that's not making other people want to invite us in.
Whew, so much that I know, right? Mic drop exactly. And I just wrote myself a note to add my disclaimer. Of course, my full-time job, I work for a website that covers gender politics and policy. Nothing I am saying represents my employer. Blah blah blah. Disclaimer. And so I'll just say that. And um, I feel like one of the other things that you're speaking to, and one of my friends that was talking about over the weekend, is this notion of voter suppression, right? That there are a million different ways to suppress the vote in America, and that disinformation, that making it so heavy and polarizing, making politics so ugly, is a form of voter suppression. Just like you're saying, people who want to be engaged, people who have opinions, people who care about what is happening in the country, see what's happening. You're like, but I want no parts of that. And that is also a form of, purposeful or not, I would argue purposeful in some ways, voter suppression. And I think it's also something to be aware of, is that um yeah, we're just making it, not only are we making it so that people don't want to vote for a particular party, like you said, they don't want to vote at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a very dangerous place to be. Democracy is voting is one of the only things we have.
Yeah, and I think that this question about misinformation and disinformation, when people, one of the things I've been doing is when people say something like, well, misinformation, obviously they were listening to all of this misinformation, which again, I think is like such a disrespectful thing to say. Oh, they're so, we talk about education levels as if, oh, well, if they only had more education, then they would see how incredibly right we are. And and I think, wow, with all of our education, there's something we're seriously not getting here. But the misinformation I've been asking people when they say it, I'm like, oh, what misinformation do you think had an impact? And they were like, well, like that Kamala wasn't qualified. And I'm like, I don't actually think that was misinform like I don't agree with that, but I don't think that's the same thing as misinformation. I think that's, a narrative on something. That's an argument. And so I think sometimes we're looking at things that are arguments and we're saying, "Oh, that's misinformation." And because of that misinformation, they voted in this way that if they were as enlightened as we are, then they wouldn't have done that. And so I I think that there's something there that we can unpack a little bit more about like, oh, when you say this, like, what do you mean? And how do you think that it had an impact? And ask people to be a little bit more granular in their thinking about things.
Okay, wait, can I jump in really quickly, Katie?
Please,
Because I'll
please, of
give you an
course.
example. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. That to me is misinformation.
Yes, that was misinformation. I got to tell you, nobody who I talked to seemed to be focused on that, you know? So I think that's the
There.
thing. It's like, yes, that was misinformation.
Just-
That was a thing that wasn't happening. Um,
Mm.
and I think that we then need to recognize the stuff we're susceptible to as well. So, after the election, when there were people who were like, wait a minute, like, where did all those votes go? You know, because not as many people voted in this election as the last election, but people were seeing that as like, wait, all these votes disappeared. And it's like, no, 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 there's stuff we're susceptible to. Um, and yeah, so yes, there is. So that's another thing I have to acknowledge. Yes, there was misinformation, and I don't think that explains all of it, you know, or that describes everything that people uh, are thinking is the misinformation. Sorry, Katie, you were going to say something
No, this is great. This is so great. Thank you for explaining this. I mean, I will say that this conversation is so helpful, Tanya, and it's going down hard in my stomach. It really is. It is. It just is. I think it's easier to think I'm right. It's just easier to think that my side is the right side. It's uncomfortable to question my own beliefs when, like I have people in my life that are afraid and I just and yet everything you're saying is so helpful and not something I have heard before. So I really appreciate your perspective. And I think it's going to help a lot of people who are listening, including myself, because I will listen more times than multiple times after this. I think one question I have, because I know we only have a few minutes left, is more on the psychology space. So for people who are listening, regardless of their side, most likely they're on the left if they're listening to this podcast, and they're really struggling, like alone, like when they're alone, they're struggling. And this isn't even about conversations with people. This is just on their own. Um, do you have any words of wisdom or words of peace that could help them? Because I just think a lot of people are really having a hard time right now.
though. Yeah. I mean, I will acknowledge that there are people who are extreme and there are people who are violent, but not nearly as many as we think there are. So before the election, Americans were so worried, Democrats and Republicans, like 72% of Americans were worried that there was going to be violence in the aftermath of the election. So I went and I looked at the data. that told me whether or not there would be violence. No, I'm just kidding. Like it doesn't, we don't have that predictive quality. But there was this interesting study where they gave Democrats and Republicans these scenarios, and they were like, here's a scenario of politically motivated violence, like when one scenario throwing rocks and another scenario actually killing somebody. And they were like, like, do you think this is justifiable? And what percentage of people in the other party do you think would find it justifiable? Democrats and Republicans thought that nearly 40% of people in the other party would find politically motivated murder to be justifiable. And I'm like, well, yeah, if that's what we think, then no wonder we're all scared. Like, if you think that somebody would just kill you and think it's okay, because of politics, then yeah, that's frightening. So the actual numbers are 1 to 2% of people would find it justifiable. So it's not zero. The other thing I'm going to tell you is that it's 1% of Republicans and 2% of Democrats who found that politically motivated murder to be justifiable. I know. See, it's shocking. Anytime, like, I'm always sharing stuff with people on the left that it's like we don't know this about ourselves, but there's something here that's helpful for us to hear. So, all of that to say, yes, these things exist, but most people do not support violence and most people are not extremists. So if somebody is there in front of you, if they're, a Republican, if they voted for Trump, chances are they do not want to do you harm. And that goes very much against the idea that we have in our minds about that.
Some very calming as always, and very insightful and very helpful for me as I embark upon a road trip with my family to Alabama for the holiday. Yeah. Oh, great. Dr. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us again for oh my gosh, the ninth time, if that is true. Where can people find you? And do you have any last calls to action for our listeners?
People can find me at taniaisrael.com. Also, follow me on social media at Tania Israel PhD. Listen to my podcast, Ready to Be Strong. Read all my ridiculous articles that I'm writing and just my own trying to process all of this. Yeah, so all of that. The last question that I have, because I think that, well, not I think, I'm going to say, I'm going to quote Rent, the musical Rent, where they say the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation. And given that, the final question that I have for you is for Karen. Tell me about what I am seeing behind you on the wall, because this looks like a serious creation.
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you for bringing it back here, Dr. Tanya. Masterful. Thank you so much. I forgot we were going to talk about this. So, this started as a couple of these boxes so I could decide what wallpaper I wanted on my Zoom wall. And then I found this company, Auto Studio. They're woman owned, they are based in Canada, and they will sell you swatches of their peel and stick renter friendly wallpaper. And I ordered a batch of them. And then it just became this like, well, why would I pick one of them when I can pick all of them? And so I don't have all of the ones they sell, but I have a lot of them. And I will also like, I love them that they're woman owned. I love that it's renter friendly, even though I own this home. But I mean, a number of these are, I heard of them because there's a woman I follow on social media, Francesca Ramsey, who's a comedian and an author and all of the things. She has this viral video where she's painting these beautiful, like African inspired designs on her wall. And she's singing this song, I'm not getting my deposit back. And I'm totally okay with that. Like, and it's just this amazing video of her all over her house, like just cackling doing this art, right? And some of these panels are her doodles that she scanned from her notebook and sent to Auto Studio, and they made peel and stick wallpaper of it.
Wow.
I'm obsessed with this notion. So thank you very much for asking. I could talk about it all day.
I feel like you have created the decoupage that I have been writing about just right there behind you.
Stay tuned. I'm going to keep adding. Thank you.
This is amazing. And for our listeners who aren't sure what you were talking about, check us out on YouTube because you can see Karen's backdrop and it is absolutely gorgeous. Thank you again, Tanya. It's been so wonderful chatting with you. Thank you for taking the time. We'll see everybody next week.